and they came back in June and proposed to basically eliminate all the peer recovery services, including the drug courts and the RCO programs and the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse and the Warm Line and all these other things. And that probably would have happened. But I want to tell a little bit of a story as to why that didn't happen for a minute before we go into how you can participate in that as we move forward and why it's important that you participate in that as we move forward. The first reason it didn't happen is because of one person, Neil Campbell. Yeah, not everybody's as big a fan of Barry Manilow as I am, but Barry Manilow has everybody knows who he is though. And he has this song that's not his most famous song called One Voice. But the point of that song is he says it just takes one person, one voice to speak up and other voices will follow. And pretty soon there's a whole bunch of voices. And that's what's happened in this case. Many years ago, about 13, 14 years ago, Neil Campbell came to be the executive director of the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. And she had been working in state government tied to this. And this year the council is celebrating 20 years. But basically, this is Neil's vision. And if it had not been for Neil, none of this would be happening. And she had Joyce and Owen. And then they built and they built and they had good days and bad days and boring days. And it took over a decade to get to the point of where Georgia had built up this great reputation and great programs for recovery. But then because of COVID-19, in the blink of an eye, it almost all went away. And had Neil and Joyce and Owen not done all the work they had done, had there not been a network of RCOs around the state, had there not been over 700, I guess close to 750 cares around the state, and all their friends and relatives and other people in recovery that came because of that, we wouldn't have been in a position to do what we did. And what we did was we decided to get united. And that's so important. And it's easy to glide right past that key thing that happened. But because of Neil, we were able to earn the trust and support of the organization of the RCOs, the CARES, and so many other constituencies within the recovery community. And Neil led the way down in this, and I was there to help her, and y'all were there to help her. And everything got restored, 100%, practically speaking. Plus, we got a license plate passed. Plus, we got a piece of legislation passed that equalizes some stuff for judges with temporary driver's licenses. And we started a group called the Working Group on Addiction and Recovery, made up of senators and representatives in the General Assembly. And there's only like 4 or 5 of those in the nation. Because all that happened, in a crisis, we were able to do what we needed to do to save recovery. And so that's why I'm going to talk to you about recovery advocacy today, because we got, I don't want to say we got lucky one time, but you know, even the best Olympic medalists don't win gold every time. And we have to be in a position to win every time. And we only do that if we keep growing our advocacy effort. So that's what this is about. It's, yes, we had a good session, but guess what? They start back in January. And we're gonna have to go through this all over again. And at any day, they could say there's a special session because the budget got worse because of COVID. So our mission at the council from an advocacy point of view is to keep growing the recovery community into what we call a constituency of consequence. Now, a constituency is a voting group. And of course, we know what consequence means. We want to be a group, not that elected officials like or dislike. We want to be one they respect and fear. That's what we want. We do not want them to ever again propose to take away our funding. In fact, we want them to feel like they have to increase our funding every year. So that's the goal here, to build a constituency of consequence so that no elected official will ever want to cut recovery programs. And in fact, they'll be pretty scared if they don't propose to increase recovery programs. So, having said that, remember, interrupt me at any time for any reason, because I can talk for an hour and a half. This yard sign, which I think it's a real yard sign, and I think it's one of the coolest ones I've ever seen. Darth Vader, together we can rule the galaxy. And I put this yard sign up because we have Darth Vaders in our lives. We have people who do not support the recovery community. They say phrases like, those people don't deserve my tax dollars because of their lifestyle choices. And they don't like us, and they don't think we deserve funding. And they're very real. And they're, in fact, look, going to give a shout out to Katie Pope and the folks at Reboot Jackson who alerted me to a situation in Banks County that they're on top of up there. They're leading the way because some folks up in Banks County do not want a treatment center for women to be in their neighborhood. And I saw the Facebook post that a person put up a minute ago. If this comes in, those people will live within a mile of our church. Now, folks, where I'm from, that's just blatant discrimination right there. So that's today in Georgia, in Banks County. And thank goodness we have Reboot Jackson organizing the effort in that part of the state to stand up for us in that community. The county seat's called Homer. So when I tell you there's Darth Vaders, we had an example of it today. We always like to do what's right with you. We're not going to go through and do it per se, but I will just tell y'all what's right with me. For those of you that didn't know me, what's always right with me is my son, Jack, and that's my son, Jack, and that's my wife up there with Superman. And Jack just had tonsil surgery, and he's recuperating, but he's adopted, and my little gift from God, and Jack's always was what's right with me. This was a smaller group, we go through it. So let's start out with some basics. What is advocacy? Well, it's very important that you understand it's a process, not an event. I suspect most people on this call, I see that there's 30 something maybe, know what ARAD is, Addiction Recovery Awareness Day. And we are having that, by the way, in 2021, one way or the other on February 4th. And that's not advocacy, that's an event within the family of advocacy. But you don't just show up to ARAD and say, well, I showed up down there and be done. So Sharon raised her hand. Laurie, if you can help me.
One moment, you said Sharon?
Sharon Roebuck.
All right, there you go, Sharon. Can you unmute yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that date?
Yes, ma'am. In 2021, we're going to have ARAD on February 4th.
February 4th. Okay.
It just kind of works out with the schedule of the legislature and, frankly, days that the rooms were available. But I believe that's, well, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is, but it is 100% February 4th. And we're working. Okay. We had an ARAD meeting today, just so you know, working very closely with the venues down at the Capitol to make sure that we know if they can be in person, if they got to be modified in person, if they got to be virtual, but whatever we can do, we are literally had our first meeting today to track our options. But so anyways, advocacy is a process. It's not just one event, and you got to understand that. That's a mistake too many people think is, well, I showed up for the AIDS walk and I guess AIDS is covered for this year, right? Nope. There's 364 days a year that walk wasn't on. And the same is true with recovery. So it's an ongoing process. Now, it also happens at all levels. At the local level, at the city, at the local level, at the county, statewide, regionally, and nationally and internationally. Now, for us, I would suggest to you that of all those levels, the local level is the most important, that city and county level. And once you get the city council members and mayor and your county commissioners to buy into recovery or any issue, you know, that's when the congressman, that's who they ask. That's who the senators ask. And so in many, many ways, it's important to start at that most smallest base and get their support. And we'll talk about that. And by the way, advocacy is not showing up making the news that night, making the newspaper the next morning and saying, wasn't that a great story and great headline? Advocacy is about achieving specific outcomes. For example, getting a piece of legislation passed to get a license plate on the back of cars that say recovery is real, or getting a bill passed to tell the state that if a judge can give a temporary license for someone pulled over with alcohol, you can't discriminate against people pulled over for narcotics. They also have a right until they're convicted to have a temporary license too, so they can go to their job and provide for their families. So stop discriminating. And that's that law we got passed. But see, those are very specific outcomes. So that's what advocacy is. Georgia Recovers was a great example of advocacy. The state gave GCSA basically $1 million. We did the billboard campaign, 18 peers, supported by some social media messaging, and hundreds of thousands of people were reached. And that led to the successful passage directly of the license plate, which is going to reach hundreds of thousands of more people. So that was a great example of a good advocacy campaign. Politics is at the core of advocacy. And we need a bipartisan coalition. And Laurie, if you can check those questions in the chat box. But we need Democrats and Republicans. We need liberals and conservatives. We need moderates and independents. We need libertarians. We need whatever you are, we need you. And we want to be welcome in every office by everybody. But politics now is a combination of art and science. I mean, you know, you can get a political science degree, right? And there is some science to politics, but very much so an art. It requires a respect for the process, and that's important that you understand that. At the end of the day, nobody really cares what anybody thinks anymore in 2020, but they do care what the power of a group thinks. And if you show up down at the Capitol and throw a hissy fit and yell and scream, no Democrat, no Republican's gonna pay attention to you. But if you respect the universe they work in and they live in, they're more afraid of us than we are of them. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that politics are very professional. It is a business. And people who don't understand it's a business tend to not do very well advancing the goals they want to advance. And it's
Jeff, I got one question.
Yes, ma'am.
From Cynthia Campos. She says she lives in Brunswick, Georgia, and she's trying to be an advocate for recovery in that area. Do you have any recommendations for her area?
Well, Cynthia, we can talk offline, because I don't think that we have an RCO actually in Glenn, and I know we don't, and we need to grow that area. And so with you down there, you and I can talk about how I can help you get in contact with the folks in Jessup and Statesboro and Savannah, and we can hone in on Glenn County with you there. But we're gonna need some good work in Glenn County. So we can talk offline about that, because it'd be a blessing. And that's true for anybody. If you live in a county without an RCO, you know, we need help. So 159 counties in Georgia. That's more counties than any other state in the United States except the state of Texas. And each one of them thinks they're of their own little kingdom. So we need 159 organizations is what we really need. But relationships are key to advocacy, y'all. Outcomes. I want you to think about this for a minute. Everything almost every advocate does is asking for some type of change. Change this law, make this new law, get rid of that current law, give this money here, don't give that money there. It's always about change. And there's hundreds and hundreds of issues asking for change at the state capitol. There's dozens at the county level and city level, and there's thousands up in Washington. And that's a pretty big deal. So we're asking to change institutional policies and practices, changing public attitude and behavior. And that's where I like to stop and remind you, you know, the Georgia Council believes there's a stigma around our disease. Well, if you believe that too, and you should, then you have to accept the reality of what that means. Think about what that means. We're asking elected officials and businesses and others to support a controversial issue because there's a stigma around it. That's a big deal for them to do that. I want to give you two examples really quick. In the night after World War II, in the early 1950s, America changed, and a lot of people moved from agriculture jobs to jobs in the city to these new skyscrapers, and there were these things called color TVs or radios and indoor plumbing and refrigerators. These were all new for most Americans after World War II. And look, this was mostly men, but these men would get these jobs, and a lot of them would die. Because there was a stigma among insurance companies and in the business community that these men were learning to work in. And it was called the C word. And the C word was, if there had been Twitter, it would have been a thing on Twitter back then. Well, the C was cancer. And men would, when these jobs would die because of the confusion of the stigma, and they wanted to get their family the color TV and the car and the nice house in the suburbs. And look, you fast forward to today, and the national pastime that they say is baseball. They celebrate cancer with blue stuff on, you know, on the national pastime. And you go in October to Walmart, the nation's largest retailer, and you can buy a pink ribbon breast cancer awareness shirt for like $7.99. I know, because I've got one. Now, we were gone a long way from the C word where people were dying to the largest retailer in the national pastime celebrating awareness of cancer. I'll give you another example. AIDS. AIDS came on the national consciousness back in the early 1980s, 82, 83. And it was heavily stigmatized. And rumors were flying around the way rumors flew around in the 80s before the internet. And people would say things like, you can't be in the room with somebody because if you breathe the same air, you'll catch it. And people died because of the stigma around AIDS in the beginning. Now fast forward to 2020. AIDS is the #1 disease funded by federal taxpayer dollars in Washington, D.C. And the Democrats and Republicans fight with each other over who can get more money for it. We're not there yet. We want to be there. We want Republicans and Democrats fighting over who can give more money to research and support for programs for substance use disorder. We want the Walmarts selling Recovery Month t-shirts for $7.99 every September, and baseball and basketball and football and hockey and everything else having recovery night events in September and throughout the season at their events. And we're not there yet. So that's what I mean by changing institutional policies and public attitudes. That's what I mean about a stigma. That's where we're not, and other medical diseases are. And just to show you how we are as a community, we go, by the way, we want more power and influence in the process. Neil Campbell, if she's taught me nothing, she's taught me this. The most important voice in the recovery process is the peer voice. We love doctors, we love clinicians, we love law enforcement, we love everybody else involved in the process. But our voice has to be the voice at the head of the table when you talk about recovery. And y'all know what she says specifically, nothing about us without us. And that's got to be more than a slogan. It's got to be a way of life. And that's also what we're asking for. So we're asking for a lot, is what I'm trying to tell you. Now this right here, advocacy in the middle, you don't just show up, and Marie can tell you this, you know, we don't just show up on the day of ARAD and say, well, let's do some stuff. You know, we do research in advance. We plan and coordinate in advance. We build alliances with like-minded people in advance. We analyze policy in advance. Only then do you get to do the next three. Lobby, get active about it, and seek publicity about it. If you try to do the last three first, it usually doesn't work out very well. You might get a headline here or there, but you're not going to sustain things. So that's what I mean about the science of advocacy. There's a way to go about it. And what the council offers you as an individual and your organization that you are associated with is we will help you for free through me and Neil with this formula right here. We will help you understand how to do this screen anytime you ever have a question.
Wow, I got a couple of questions right now too.
All right. Okay. There we go.
Okay, I have one comment from Susan Morley. She said when she started teaching, she guarded her sobriety like it was a big secret. She had to sign a morality clause when she got the job, actually. I don't know if you want to speak to that. And I have another question from Gregory O'Hara. Susan, do you have, Jeff, do you have a comment for her?
I'll go to that now, sure. So, you know, society is changing, and it's going to take us some time. Here's two examples. Delta Airlines, ironically based in Atlanta, Georgia, is probably one of the leading corporate supporters of supporting their employees who deal with substance use disorder. And I've been in treatment with many, many Delta people and see them come through my place. And Delta's on one end of the spectrum. Now, right now under federal law, if a driver of a truck, a CDL license, he gets or she gets in trouble, they lose their license for life. So on the one hand, you got Delta doing a great job with people who fly airplanes and go up here and defy the laws of gravity. And over here, we've got the federal government saying the truck driver needs recovery and gets treatment and gets better. They can't drive ever again to support them and their family, and everything in between. So morality clauses are still there. One of the issues that's going to be a big issue that Neil is pushing with a coalition of people in the nation, and we're going to be leaders in Georgia in 2021, is just that, Susan. There's already a federal law on the books about parity in insurance. That basically you can't discriminate for people with mental health and substance use disorders in insurance coverage from other, physical medical things. But it's not being enforced in many states, and Georgia's one of those states that the insurance commissioners haven't made the insurance companies follow federal law. And we're going after
that. We're breaking up really bad.
Okay.
Whoever that is
I just wanted to say I have experience with that too, because I was denied insurance because of a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis from my marriage therapist. So, but I wanted to say a little bit of hope. I'm not under contract anymore with the schools, but I still substitute teach. And so I do talk to high schoolers, and they know me as the sub, and they know I'm in recovery, and CARES did that for me because I use the recovery language. And I introduce myself in that way, and it's such a gift. But I'm not under contract, so it's easier for me.
No, but see, that's the kind of stuff we want to do. We want to hear on a call like this, because Neil's pretty smart, and I'm average at best on a good day. But we think about things, and that we hadn't thought about that. So when Susan says, that impacts teachers, that makes us want to immediately think about, okay, how do we go into that community and start breaking that stigma down, that wall down? So feedback all the time is so important to us. Loree, was there another question?
There was. This is from Gregory O'Hara, and he says, how can we politic and advocate for behavioral health services to be considered essential workers? From what he sees, how do we get that conversation that behavioral health is relevant to the issues we are facing? Substance abuse, social unrest, mental disorders, and COVID-19, and many others. And I'll go ahead and unmute him too.
Sure, go ahead and unmute him if he wants to say more.
Yeah. Let me find him. Gregory, you can unmute yourself if you want to comment. Gregory, there you go. So I don't know
All
if
right.
it starts.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, Gregory.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for hearing me. I am a CPS, and I was phased out due to the legislation that was just passed with the state cuts, and so I'm in the process of looking for other work. And my question is, for what I see, just behavioral health is not really at the forefront. I just saw a commercial with just a senator or a politician that was saying we need to fight for our nurses and doctors, and they did not say anything about behavioral health services. And from my standpoint, a lot of substance abuse disorders, mental health disorders are all behavioral health related and are just as important. And just how can I get started or get in the right direction of just advocating to make people see the relevant and the importance that is just as equal as to what we're facing?
That's first of all, it's a great question. It's a great observation of that commercial. And look, I'm going to speak candidly and with respect. I mean, some of the mental health services, frankly, did not fare as well in the budget as we were blessed and fortunate to have happened on the substance use side. And we, Neil talks with Sherry Jenkins Tucker, I think every day, literally. And there's plans being made already for how do we try to help them on that front, because you're right, workers in substance use disorder and mental health should definitely be protected and deemed essential in the same way that nurses and doctors were, who we all love. And the analogy we've used is from COVID is, look, when COVID hit, back in March or so, in Albany, it went through Albany really bad, in Georgia, and we all get that. And we get that hospitals were, doctors' offices and all that were the front line. But here's what else we get too. We also get that Governor Kemp has said that Kathleen Toomey, Dr. Kathleen Toomey, is the chief medical officer for Georgia right now. And she put a memo out about a month ago now, right at the end of the session, right before July. And we have it, and we're about to launch all over about this, where the memo was about mental health and substance use disorder directly related to COVID and how it's about to get a lot worse. So we believe that we're actually the next front line in COVID, and we see it starting now. And so we absolutely think that employees in these two industries, if you will, forgive my imperfect language, but y'all know what I mean, need to be deemed essential. Now, to your other question, and we're going to work on that and I will tell y'all, let me digress. I'm all over the board, y'all. Sorry. Let me tell y'all this. Let me tell y'all the big picture of what's going on in advocacy in Georgia. So we just had that session run long because of COVID. We get that. September is National Recovery Month. We launched today the awareness in Georgia that we're going to have some programs in September. We're going to actually extend them through October because of the late start. So we'll have Recovery Month being in September and most of October this year. So that's one bookend, if you'll think of that as a bookend. The next, its partner bookend is the 2021 General Assembly session. So everything from September 1st to the end of the session next spring, and they'll start in January, we're going to coordinate as best we can on a different scale, a much higher and much more visible scale on these types of issues, Gregory, talked about. We can't do them all in one session. I don't want to mislead anybody. But what I do want to tell you is with that working group on addiction and recovery, we will have members of the General Assembly having meetings between now and January, working with Neil on pieces of legislation to introduce in advance for mental health and substance use disorder. And I can tell you with a straight face, that's never happened in Georgia, ever, not once. So that's a big change. And that's what we're going to do is organize starting in September publicly for the session in January. The way you get involved, and again, you'll see it at the end, and I'm not trying, it's just an offer. You can do anything you want, but if you want to reach out to me, Neil and I are building an advocacy team. We have a good number of people on there ready, and we will meet with you privately, these days via Zoom, and coach differently and get you plugged in. And just want everybody that's interested in advocacy to text me, email me when the time is right for you, and we'll get you plugged into that. It's volunteer group, but we'll get you plugged in at a leadership level in our advocacy thing. And once you get going in that, we've had folks that are just rocking and rolling, doing great things around the state, and you can do it too. Everybody can. So why are we advocating? To save lives. Now, this is one of a very few times where an advocacy group has the moral high ground in any meeting we go to. And I want to explain that. We live in America. I'm proud to be in America. You are too. I know where there's some unrest right now, but I promise you I've been to dictatorships and I've been to China twice, and this beats the heck out of what's going on in China. So that's how it goes. And there's things that Americans argue about that we want. I'm gonna give you an example. We like to ride bikes, and my son in particular likes to ride bikes. And so I'm all for bike lanes and all that stuff, and that's great. And if your city wants to go before the city council and say, we want to have some of our tax dollars buy some bike lanes, and it's going to cost $1 million in our city, I don't care. I could care less. I'm all for you. But that's a want. You don't have to have a bike lane to have people be safe and alive. You have to have funding for mental health and substance use disorder for people to stay alive. We're a need, not a want. And the minute you click that everything in your budgets, that these governments deal with, and these donations these businesses make, it's one of two things. It's a want or a need, and I'm all for wants. Go be for everything you want to be. But my mission, your mission, the recovery mission, we're about 3 little words: to save lives. And once you get all the lives saved in Georgia, that's great. But until then, we need to be at the top of everybody's list. So that's what you're asking for. That's why you're doing it. If anybody says, well, why would recovery advocate? Because we're trying to save lives. What are you trying to do? Now, you got to answer some questions. It's not easy. You got to ask yourself, what change are we going to bring about? And those that you're asking that to are going to ask you some hard questions. Not long questions, just hard questions. Well, what's your evidence? Can you prove to me what you're saying? I'm here to tell you we can prove it, but you have to be able to prove it. Then they're going to say, well, you say you won't change. What's your big plan? What's your big idea? What's the alternative? You have to have a plan. You can't just say, people are dying from addiction, fix it. Well, they're going to ask you, well, how do you want us to fix it? You better have a professional answer. The good news is we do. You got to know who can make the change. Is it in Washington? Is it in Atlanta at the state capitol? Is it a local issue? Is it even a government issue? Is it a business that needs to make a change? Is it a school system that needs to make a change? You got to know who you need to talk to. And then you got to know who your friends or opponents are. And I promise you this, you'll always have opponents, 100%. And you better make friends. And you got friends if you ask for it. The downside of our disease is that more people are dying from it than anything else other than COVID right now. The reverse of that is that means we have an awful lot of people who've been impacted by our disease, that if we educate them, if we reach out to them, if we let them know they're not alone, they will join our movement. Rebellions are built on hope, and we have the hope that there's a lot of people impacted by this. Then you have to decide, what does winning mean? I want to give you an example. we knew this session that we weren't going to get everything solved. I mean, Susan and Greg just made two good points of things that haven't been solved. But we were determined to get that license plate passed, and we got it passed. And we were determined not to get cut out of the budget, and we did not. So you got to be able to define victory. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't stop. It just means it's like a football game. You know, you're not going to win the Super Bowl in the first game, and you're not going to win it on the first time you have the ball on offense. But the first time you have the ball on offense, you have a goal to win. And the goal to win is to go down and put the ball in the other end zone and get 6 points. And then let Jack Breedlove come in and kick an extra point and give you 7, because Jack kicks footballs. That's a goal. You didn't try to win the Super Bowl on the first series of the first game. You just tried to score a touchdown. And you can go, hey, we won right there. We have more work to do, but that was a victory. And that's what we've got to do, is understand how to define victory in an advocacy movement so we don't get depressed that we didn't save the world in one day. So an advocacy issue is about the implementation of policy in a way that can change to have an impact on people's lives. I took that picture right there, by the way. We have to have clear policy solutions, and they have to be based on clear, understandable, and honest policy analysis. And I want to stress honesty is a key to everything I'm telling you. I used to be the chief of staff for a member of Congress and other elected officials. One of my bosses had a game that we would play. We'd wait and see how long it took the people coming in to advocate were going to lie to us or mislead us. You can't BS BSers. Honesty works. It's so rare. Never, ever lie. In fact, sometimes what they're looking for is they've already done the research themselves, and they may be for 9 out of 10 things. And they may know there's one problem, and they may ask you if there's any problems. And a lot of groups will go, oh, no, there's no problems here. This is great. What they're looking to do is go, yeah, there's 10 things in this bill, 9 of them are not a problem. This one's a problem, but we're the group that can help you figure it out. We're the group that can work with you on it. And then all of a sudden you built up trust. So I strongly urge transparency, clarity, and honesty. You know, this slide is probably could have been taken out, but you know, we get out of it what we put into it is what I'm trying to say here. So you don't have to be a full-time advocate. You might give an hour a year. You might give an hour a week, an hour a month, or a little more, a little less. But we build this army, we build this team, we build this statewide family. And the person giving an hour and the person giving 20 hours, that's what makes us a powerful constituency of consequence. So whatever you can give, be true to what you can give. Don't oversell yourself. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time measured. All these things go into what is a SMART advocacy objective. These are the kind of things that we help you with. Our advocacy objectives help us identify who's the decision maker, what's the action or decision we're trying to get done, and most importantly, what's that timeline look like? Some of the timelines are fast and some of them are decades long, but you got to know which is which. Now, you got to organize yourself. You got to know what your resources are. There's two kinds of languages in politics: money and votes. Delta and Coca-Cola and Home Depot, when they want real change, they write really big checks. Well, we don't have that kind of money. But we do have people. I told you, we have more people impacted by this disease than anything else medically. So if we organize our community, we should have one of the largest communities in the state. That gives us power. We know how to organize it. We just have to build it. And when we build it statewide, that's where we're going to get the political power. So our number one resource is people. We need to know what funds we do have. and how to use those funds effectively. And of course, our reputation and our relationships, they define us too. Can't tell you again, you see so many advocacy groups go after the quick headline to burn somebody, to make them look bad, to make the evening news. They're never going to be trusted or accepted up on you know, quote unquote Capitol Hill again. So you have to make choices. You got to have a strategy. You got to really think it through in advance. I can't tell you that. Adrenaline gets flowing, emotions get going, pressure gets put on you. But if you have a strategy and you're clear and focused and coherent, it's based on external realities, not internal pipe dreams. You know, you don't get to sit around by yourself and say the way the world ought to be. You have to deal with the way the world really is. You match up that strategy to all your resources, and then you build your structure. And once you coordinate your structure and you're decisive, you move forward with confidence. So that's how we organize. Here's the second Star Wars reference out of 3. I put that in there as a reminder that there are people that do not believe we deserve a seat at the table as people within the recovery community, and there's people outside the recovery who don't think anybody needs anybody about recovery and addiction and mental health. And so, you know, we are in a war. That's what it is. So for every policy change objective, there is a decision maker. Now that person may not have the sole authority, but they're responsible for that policy, and they'll be the gatekeeper for changes. Now that works in the positive and the negative. Once you build an alliance with somebody, and that person's well respected at that governmental level or in that business community, all of a sudden they can be your friend. They can get things done for you. That's Commissioner Nancy Jester, who I happened to be working for when I was arrested. And she's a DeKalb County commissioner, and that was a joke photo. But can you influence a target like a commissioner? Yes. Maybe not directly. It's pretty hard to get to the mayor of the city of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. I mean, it's pretty hard to get to her. But you can get to business people that support her. You can get to city council members. You can get to city staff people, you know, to get to her. And so that's part of good at advocacy is learning how to get to the target. Now, however, a Nancy Jester is very easy to get to because they have public meetings. They're very accessible at the county and city level and in most places outside of the city of Atlanta itself. So you just got to know. Will our target be persuaded by our argument alone? Probably not, maybe. If they're not, what else is going to be needed? Let me give you an example. We'd like to think that it's good enough to say that more people are dying from our disease than anything else. Therefore, the budget should have the most money of any medical issue for recovery, but that's not the way it works. So what Neil does is we give examples of how recovery programs save taxpayer dollars because of what they don't do. For example, every person you divert from the criminal justice system in a local county, and they're not going through the sheriff's and judges' offices and their budgets, well, that's more money they have in those budgets. So you have to not just take we think this is the best way to do it, and we're right. No, you got to show all kinds of different arguments as to why your point needs to be enacted. Is our target under pressure from anybody else? Of course they are, because everybody wants money in the budget. Everybody wants businesses to give them a donation. Everybody wants the Rotary Club to let them speak. No matter what you're doing, there's another cause that you may even support. You may be your best friend working on a different cause, but there's only so many budget dollars. There's only so many corporate giving dollars. And there's only so many invitations to speak at the Rotary Club that meets 50 times a year, you know? And so we're competing and there's pressure for other issues to get the limelight, not our issue. Stakeholders, they're anybody, y'all. The reason why they're anybody for us is because we have one of those unique situations where everybody in America is impacted by our issue, either directly or with one of their friends or family members. And once we convince them of that, once we educate them on that, you literally see people cry. You see the aha moment. You see the, well, you know, you're right. This impacted my best friend's son or my nephew or even closer to home. But once you get it to that personal level, we can start influencing the issue. But that's getting through that stigma. And sometimes that's what it takes, is just one-on-one. That's why I said it's all built on relationships. So that's Governor Kemp. So stakeholders are either natural allies or potential allies. They're either natural or potential opponents. And there's many people undecided, and they're undecided for many reasons. But all of them are subject to influence. And I want to tell you this, an opponent today can be your biggest ally tomorrow. Case in point, Nancy Jester. When Nancy Jester hired me, I lied and misled and manipulated her about my disease. She didn't know. And when I got arrested as her chief of staff, she found out the hard way. And she was pretty angry. And before that, her comments about recovery were not supportive. She was not a supporter. Now, I don't recommend everybody go out and get arrested like I did, but I can tell you what's happened. Nancy Jester has held a town hall meeting specifically on recovery. She sponsored the Recovery Month proclamation last year in DeKalb County, and she has gotten more funding in DeKalb for it. And we turned an enemy into an ally. And we can do that across Georgia in every community sooner or later. So don't burn bridges. You never know what's going on in somebody's life. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe their wife, spouse, husband, kids, somebody's, you know, they may have stuff going on about our disease that they're processing themselves. Just keep that in mind. Now, this is the other mathematical solution, and this would be one to take a picture of or write down. And I messed up because the last plus sign is supposed to be an equal sign. But this is Harvard 101 right here. This is it. Take nothing else away. Interest plus evidence plus relationships equals solutions. That's the formula for advocacy. Once we get their interest, then we show them the evidence. We've built those relationships. We're going to get a solution. Maybe not the full solution the first time, but something's going to happen differently and better than what's happening before. So if you get to know me or you work with our group or whatever, that's kind of the formula we use right there. So that's about as complicated and as simple as it gets all at one time right there. Now, we have different approaches to advocacy, and this is very important. And Larry, let's start watching my time. I know we have a half an hour-ish, 40 minutes.
Right, you have about a half an hour to go. Only
Sure.
question we have right now is somebody wanted to know about the license plate. Maybe you can tell us that later.
Yeah.
And another person asked about ARAD. ARAD is February the 4th, 2021.
Correct.
Y'all all want to write that down, but and then someone wanted to know, can they have access to your presentation?
Yes, of course, of course. We're happy to show the presentation. We'll come back to the license plate, but I do want to say this: there's important different approaches to advocacy, just like in sports. I mean, you know, there's different offenses you can run or defenses you can run or whatever. There's different advocacy styles. Simply, in their simplest form, they're cooperative and confrontational in their simplest forms. This persuasive thing is more complicated. But, you know, basically, there's a time and a place for both, cooperative and confrontational. There's consequences for both. That's where the trick comes in. So you can go be confrontational all you want. And heck, these days, you know, some people say that's great. But there's a professional thing that happens in politics, in political science, that happens in science. You know, in science, one of those famous guys says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And that's a scientific truth. Well, in politics, it's very similar, but it's not exactly that. For every action, there is certainly going to be an opposite reaction, but it's not necessarily going to be equal. And that's important. So you're some small advocacy group with a stigma around you, you're just trying to get started, and you decide to go up there and say, the governor kills people because he didn't fund House Bill 1234 that we said was the most important bill ever. So quit killing people, Governor. Well, the media is probably going to put you on the news that night. You're probably going to feel pretty good in your social media group about how you made the news. But you're probably never, ever going to sit there and talk to the governor's staff again about serious policy. Never. Not one time. So if the mission was to get the headline right before a vote, maybe that's what you say. If the mission's to be able to discuss multiple pieces of legislation throughout the session, it may not be what you say. We can help you with that if you want our help whenever you're doing it, because confrontational is the one with the most consequences. Cooperative, you know, it should be easier, but it's also complicated because, well, I'll give you an example. There's a situation in Augusta right now where they want to put a recovery center in Augusta, and we believe in that. And some elected officials don't want it to be there, and some do. And we made the choice, and we told the elected officials that don't want it to be there that we love you so much. And one of them has a bill that's important to us. We said, but we can't be an organization that turns our back and let people say that people seeking recovery aren't welcome in a center because they're bad, undesirable neighbors. We can't do that. And so we were being cooperative with one group, but it had some consequences with another friend. So we had to think it all through and figure out how we approached it. And that's what I mean about all this planning before you do it. Because it sounds great. Well, of course we're for a recovery home in Augusta. That was until we did some advanced work before we said anything publicly, and we didn't realize that there was some controversy. And then we had to go do some work behind the scenes before we did anything in public to make sure that those that might be upset by it were shown some respect on the front end. So we can help you. That's what I keep talking about with your advocacy, and how you help us is by joining and learning the Neil Campbell way. And we just grow a bigger army with everybody that helps us. The last Star Wars analogy, you may be thinking, well, maybe I'll contact Jeff and help him and Neil do some of this stuff. But what I've seen literally happen is people call me back a couple of days later and go, well, what I didn't think of was, you want me to go to a city council meeting and say something in public comment time or whatever? I don't know, because what if a reporter asks me a question? Well, I promise you this is one of the truths that I promise you is true. There's never been a story written in a paper or a news story run on television where a reporter quoted a volunteer saying the following phrase: hey, I'm just a volunteer, I don't know the answer, what's your deadline, and I'll get the people who can help you talk to you. No one's ever embarrassed a volunteer like that. They have embarrassed volunteers who try to give them answers to sound smart, to answers and questions they don't know. So if you're out in the public and you do get asked by a reporter, all you've got to say is, hey, I'm a volunteer. What's your deadline? Neil and Jeff can get back to you with the answer. And you will contact me. We will get you an answer, and that reporter will be so happy. So that's how I promise you can do this, because if you say that magic sentence, I'm just a volunteer, I don't know the answer, but I'll get it for you, you can do anything for advocacy for recovery in public. That's a promise. It's an absolute promise.
Hey, Jeff, I have a question from David Kidd.
Okay, Mr. Kidd.
Look for him. David, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Laurie. No, I didn't want to interrupt, Jeff. I just thought maybe at the end of your presentation, you mentioned the situation in Augusta, and you started out by mentioning a situation in Banks County. And I've seen that happen close to me here in the last 5 years in Oglethorpe County also. And I would guess I was particularly thinking about the Banks County issue and maybe using that as an example of how this advocacy is either working or not working in one of those situations.
Sure, I'll do that real quick. First of all, let me qualify on Banks County. We've not decided if we're getting involved or not. We were just told about it literally an hour and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
So we'll do our due diligence to make sure at our level, I mean, we just don't know yet. I mean, we just don't even know, you know, I mean, I will say this. See, that's a great question that Mr. Kidd asked right there. See, on the front end, it's out, well, of course we're for recovery centers in Banks County. Well, we are until we found out that the person proposing it was convicted over in Texas for running a bad place, you know. You just got to make sure, that's what I mean about doing all that research in advance. Now, I don't believe this about that person in Banks County. I don't even know their name. My point is, before you do something public, you do your homework in private, get all your ducks in a row. But let's presume for a minute that everything's great in Banks County. Now I want to pivot to Augusta because that's where some action has taken place. So you got the NIMBYs. Y'all know what a NIMBY is, not in my backyard, right? So you got the NIMBYs saying those people, we don't want no recovery place right here, you know, where we live. They're bad people. So I've testified twice before the House and the Senate in support of this. And what our testimony has been is, look, we're for local control, but we can't tolerate discrimination. You know, if you're going to use the excuse, and this is the excuse in Augusta, see, this is how we help you. If you're going to use the excuse that there's a driveway that goes out of the front of the facility and it goes through a neighborhood, and you're really opposed to it, not because they're bad people, but because that will increase traffic in your little neighborhood. Okay, fine. I mean, to be honest, that might be my point of view. You know, I don't want a bunch of cars on my street. So then the facility, and this is a true story. I mean, this is not an example. It happens to back up to state property, to a technical college. And so the technical college said, look, we're all for this. You know, we support this. And so we'll give you an easement right so that there can be a little driveway built onto our property, which is commercial property, and they can just go out the back way. Well, to me, that's a positive solution to a public excuse. So see, they don't want to be seen as against people in recovery. They wanted to blame it on traffic on their street. So we came up with a solution that made that go away. Well, guess what? That was just an excuse. They're still opposed to it. Now they're fighting the solution. They're fighting the way you get to the solution. And so that's the way this advocacy stuff works. It's very slow. It's very local. And it's very, very important that we grow our constituency across the state so that, and David, you know, I know we know each other, but let's say, well, let's keep talking about Augusta. So we have an RCO in Augusta. So if Neil and Jeff drive up to Augusta and go before the Augusta County Commission and say, we're from the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse and you should support this place, and people in recovery are great like chocolate cake, and people that don't like it are mean like Darth Vader, and, you know, do what we say. They don't care. They could care less because Neil and Jeff don't live and, most importantly, vote in Augusta. We don't. So we need a recovery community in Augusta that goes to the county commission meeting and they stand up and they say, I'm Jeff Breedlove. I live at 123 Main Street, Augusta, and I'm a friend of recovery. So vote, support this. And then Sally Sue gets up and says, I'm a person in recovery over on Maple Street in Augusta. You know, it's got to be the local voice, because remember, politicians only care about their constituents, people that vote for them and their donors, but we don't have a big check to write. So we got to do the voter route. So David, I may not be going exactly where you wanted to go, but that's how it works. That's why we are organizing a statewide organization so that when we have a problem in a Banks County, we know someone. I mean, oh gosh, Laurie, help me. Our friend in Glenn County a minute ago.
Oh, I didn't hear what you said. I was reading the question. I'm sorry.
Our friend from Glenn County earlier. Sean,
From the question, was it David Kidd?
no, from Glenn County, the first question. Who's that?
Oh, Cynthia Campos.
Cynthia. So Cynthia, take Cynthia. So Cynthia moves to Glenn County and we don't have an RCO. Remember that one voice theory. With Cynthia getting interested, we can start to build a recovery community in Glenn County where we don't have one really today. And that's a great thing. And we can build one in Banks County out of this. Because our friends at the RCO in Jackson County view that as close to them. And so with Jen and John and their team getting involved, they're gonna, one thing that's gonna come out of this is a community in Banks County. I don't know how this vote's gonna go, but I know that we're gonna get more people in Banks County plugged into the recovery community. And that's pretty soon we're gonna get to 159. And that's what we wanna get to. So let me go through this real quick. We got some messaging, things that we help you with. We write position papers for you. We help you figure out your core message. We help you tailor that message for different audiences. And here's the quick example I give. And I love this example. You may not, but it makes me feel good. So let's say within a hospital. Within a hospital, there's doctors, there's nurses, and there's administrative staff. They all want the same thing, but they all three speak three different languages: doctor language, nurse language, administrator language. So a group like us, because we're in hospitals, we have to know how to say the same thing to three different groups of people in the same building in the language that each of the three of them speak. We can help you with that. Teachers speak a different language than principals, who speak a different language than school superintendents, who speak a different language than school board members. We can help you learn how to make the case to all of them. The 1-minute message, like that elevator speech, from CARES. Let me give you a real life example. Down at the state capitol and up in Congress for sure, they are busy. You may not like any of them, but they're busy. And they go from committee meeting to committee meeting to committee meeting. Now in Atlanta, most of them, they'll talk to you if you approach them in the hallway. But you got to give a Twitter version of what you want. About a minute, because they're on the way to the next meeting. If you try to be all smart, all war and peace on them, and try to give them your thesis on life, that ain't going to work. So the same concept of an elevator speech really comes in helpful when you're at a place like the Capitol. Now, when you're at your city council meeting and you're talking to your neighbor who happens to be the city council member, obviously have a normal conversation. The core message, I want to talk about this. This goes to recovery languaging, okay? Especially, and I'm going to talk about the first two for the interest of time. See, we want to change the language. It's not what's the problem, it's what's the solution. It's not how does this affect people. That's a negative. It's how does this benefit people? I promise you this, I can help you with how to use the English language to the benefit of our arguments, and happy to help you do that. So messaging is key to advocacy, and we help you with that. So that's to make you laugh.
Okay. Great. I got Kareem McPherson who got a question just about that. So it was perfectly right on time. Go ahead, Kareem.
There you go.
Hey, hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We hear you.
My brother and I started a podcast, and it's about social injustice. It's about equality and inequality, but we just try to be relevant to what's going on today and also acknowledging what's happened before today. But I want to do a podcast in the near future where we are advocating for recovery. We are both in long-term recovery, but we don't want to, for lack of a better term, speak out of turn, but still but still make our case as it relates to why we believe that recovery and the support of the powers that be is necessary for recovery to really thrive and flourish in Georgia and around the country and world, but specifically right here in Georgia where we reside. So I guess my question is, how do I effectively convey that message without, as you said, making an enemy, so to speak? And the part two of that question is, what's the best way, because we're relatively, I mean, I'm known in the recovery community that's in my circle, but in the circles that you guys are in, I am an unknown. So how do we reach out to the powers that be to ask them to come on and also speak about the benefits of recovery and just like you said in that last slide, not how somebody going to be affected, but how they're going to benefit. So how do I get the people on board and to really come on?
I'll give you a real answer. I mean, this is not, there's no varnish here. This is unvarnished. So like, for example, you and me, like we talk after this call and we get to know each other a little bit, right? You decide, okay, Breed Love's not half bad. I decide you're not half bad. We build a relationship and I get to know you. Well, I can introduce you to all kinds of elected officials that would love to go on a podcast. Neil and I do, we can get, that's how we build the recovery community together, is we build each other up. Rising tide lifts all boats. So, I mean, I'm just being honest. I've never heard your podcast yet. I don't know you yet, but once I got to know you, it's each of our missions as brothers and sisters in recovery to build each other up. And so that's what I mean about building a statewide constituency of consequence. And sometimes I call it a family, because we build each other up. And so then you say to me, Jeff, check out my podcast, and I check it out and I'm like, well, this is pretty good. I'm going to tell State Representative Eric Allen, who's the co-chairman of the Working Group on Addiction and Recovery, hey, they're going to invite you. I told them I'm hooking y'all up, and when they're legit when they call. And then you're going to get the co-chair of it. He's going to talk about what the committee's going to do. And then, he's going to then share that on his platform, because that's what politicians do. And it's going to raise your profile because that's how it works. And so we networked. There's that was a rambling way to say we all network. The way this works is that we all get to know each other and we network each other. We make things happen for each other. And that's how we build up the whole community. It's really that's as simple as that.
You can look forward to an invitation within the next month, okay?
Absolutely. And we can talk too. So that's true for everything we do. I mean, for example, and we're almost, there's one, two, that's it. There's two more real slides. So, and that's a great segue, actually, the podcast into communications. I mean, we tell people over and over and over and over again, and I always get the number wrong, y'all, but there's about 30 RCOs in this state, more or less. Most of them have a Facebook page. Well, and we actually, William's going to redesign this because we have an Instagram thing too. Everybody in recovery, the simplest, easiest, cheapest thing to do, especially during COVID when a lot of people aren't out as much as they usually are, is, hold on one second, just one second. One second. Sorry. Support each other on social media. It literally costs no dollars to like the Facebook page, the Twitter page, Instagram page of every RCO that has one, right? Of the podcasts that are out there for recovery. And let me tell y'all why really quickly, Laurie, in 5 minutes, and this will be the last point that I make actually.
Okay.
Why is it important to support each other as a recovery community on social media? I actually think this is one of the most important points I'll make to y'all tonight. And I'm gonna be blunt about it. So it's important from a media point of view and a donations point of view. Think about it for a minute. The average news outlet today has cut their staff. There's less reporters at the Atlanta Journal today than there were a year ago. right? There's more press releases going in. So, you know, Jeff Breedlove's a reporter at the AJC covering health issues, and he gets 30 press releases on his desk when he walks in the morning at 8 o'clock. Now, Jeff cares about one thing above all else: keeping Jeff's job. And he has an editor he's accountable to. So Jeff has to go to his editor and say, this is the story I want to write about today. The editor doesn't care about anything except one thing. How many clicks on the AJC social media sites is that story going to get when it's published? And Jeff's job is dependent on that. So Jeff's going to pick out stories that keep his job. So now, if Jeff doesn't know the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse, he kind of heard about him, but he doesn't know about him. Where do most younger staffers, for sure, and even older staffers these days go to validate somebody? Social media. So if Jeff, the reporter, goes to the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse and they claim to be a statewide group and they claim to be the leader for recovery, and they've got 200 followers, do I think they're a statewide group? Probably not. Do I cover their story? Probably not. But if they've got 10,000 followers on Facebook, I'm like, well, that's 10,000 clicks. Likes on social media are important. So the same for donations. So the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse wants to go to Waffle House to get a corporate donation from Waffle House for Recovery Month, because Waffle House is based in Georgia. So give us a check, because we need $10,000 to put on an event. Well, Waffle House, do you think Joe Rogers Jr., who's the CEO of Waffle House, reviews these things? Of course he does not. He's got a staffer who makes recommendations to the board of directors as to where their corporate dollars should go. Jeff, the staffer, his job is dependent on what? He's accountable for, if Waffle House gives $10,000 to the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse, that the council promote them in such a way that they can sell more waffles. That's all Waffle House cares about, people, is selling more waffles. That's it. And they want to give their giving dollars in a way that makes them look good to sell more waffles. So when Jeff, the staffer, same thing, he checks us out, we got 200 followers or 10,000. You gonna put your job on the line for 200 followers? Of course you're not. So we follow each other on social media to rise that number up. Then we share, we retweet, we comment to get our algorithms up on social media. Social media can't save recovery and save lives by itself, but it's the cheapest, easiest way to reach the most people and legitimize our community and our cause that we're underdoing. So we all have to do, including us, a better job at that. And so I'll end by saying this. If you go right here, that's my personal cell phone number at the bottom, and that's my email. Loree can tell you, I'm in a lot of meetings and stuff like that, but I love texting. You can text me whenever. You can email me whenever, if that's your thing. But if you want to get on our leadership list as a volunteer, send me a note saying, if that's a good email, so I'll have your email address. And just say, add me to your volunteer list. I want to get more into advocacy. Then you'll get invited to some smaller half-hour, 45-minute classes. We'll go deeper into Facebook. We go deeper into Twitter. We go deeper into messaging. We go deeper into how do you say something at your county commission. And these are all free. They don't cost you anything. So we give you these opportunities to learn more. It's all virtual right now. When we get back out in public, we did 20 of these in public before COVID. Later on, we'll do them in public again. But we're happy to get you hooked up with us. It's a privilege and an honor to help anybody with any advocacy questions. And I see some questions. So that's my pitch. we got time for a few questions, so put them up there and Lori, help me with them.
Yeah, you got about 10, 11 more minutes. Come on, guys, raise your hands or put a question in the question or the chat box. Let's see. Let me go back. Okay. Okay. I didn't do a poll question. Let me do that right now too. Hold on.
Okay,
Let's do that real quick. I
that.
forgot. So
While
we got
you're
to
doing
take a
that-
couple minutes.
Okay, while you're doing
So,
that, Lori, somebody asked about the license plate. I'll tell people about the license plate while you're doing that.
okay.
So the good news is we've got this license plate that has been passed. Are you ready? If you're ready.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. They're doing a poll question. So go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, I'll talk about it. Okay. So it's got to be signed by the governor, but we're told it's going to be. And once it gets signed by the governor, it then has to go through the staff process. You know, they have to approve a lot of little things. So it's going to be about, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months or something like that before it's ready for sale. But it did pass. The design we've submitted, we've been told should have no problems. It's our banner image on our Facebook page. And it says it's Georgia recovers. Well, it says Georgia at the top and it says recovery is real at the bottom. And it's got this logo thing we use. It's really pretty, actually. But yeah, basically sometime within a year, you'll be able to buy the license plate. And yes, there'll be a little fee, just like the Georgia Bulldog license plate has a fee and the fishing license plate has a fee and all that. The money goes to the council and to the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network 50-50. You know, we don't expect that money. It really wasn't for the sake of the money, and that money will all go into programming to advance mental health and substance abuse. But it's really to get the license plates on the car. So look for we got to be patient with the bureaucratic process, but it's going to go through it, and it's going to be fine. And it'll be a few months before they're for sale, but they will be for sale. And we'll certainly be promoting them when they're for sale. We do have to get a minimum of about 1,200 people. I am not worried about that. I'm not trying to you know, brag, but I think we'll certainly get 1,200 people in recovery in Georgia to buy a license plate.
Great. All right. So I'm going to end the poll. Now, I was trying to share the picture that you sent me of the license plate, but I can't do it. It's not allowing me to do it in here. But
it's a great way for people that don't know it to go visit our Facebook page and look right up at our banner, and you'll see it.
There you go.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna back up this slide. We need you to follow us. And when you follow us, if you're saying, you know, I really want to get into that vibe, to know what the council's doing. I'm telling you the truth. We put it out there on social media. That's really where we put it. Lori, am I right? I mean, we're pretty active and far more active than our emails, far more active than that. So you follow us, check in regularly like so many people do, and you're going to know what's going on in recovery.
Great. I'll tell you the results of the poll questions, guys. There are 90% of the attendees on here are CARES, 32 are CPSs, 10% are supervisors, 3 are not CARES or supervisors. They're not CARES, they want to be, and we got 13% that are our allies. There you go. I'll share it with y'all. There you go.
I'm a CARES. CARES 37 is the best.
I'm a CARES 22. So I have several people saying they're going to get one. And Susan Morley says she's laughing because she was actually going to miss the polling questions. Hugs to George, because George has been here giving us information through the chat box, helping me out. And I appreciate George Brock for being here.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, he's always on time. We have about, 6 more minutes, but she says it's been a fantastic presentation, and she appreciates all she's learned. And she's fired up.
Well, thanks. Let me tell you all a little bit about Recovery Month and what's going to go on this year. Like everybody else, we're dealing with the reality of COVID. So today, some grant applications went out. Want to thank DBHDD, our wonderful partners at DBHDD, Commissioner Judy Fitzgerald and her team. We love them so much. And we all grew through this budget challenge. And she spoke up for us, y'all. I want to say that. But they were kind and gracious, and they're the ones that provide the funding for the grants. And we just thank them publicly so very much. And these grants will go out over the next number of days. And the events have to be modified for COVID. There's no debate about that. And they've got options for car rallies and virtual events and in-person events with a whole bunch of conditions on them and all this stuff. But we're going to have some events around the state. You know, we don't know where they're going to be because the application process isn't finished. We'll do proclamations in communities around the state outside of those events for Recovery Month. The council will do some virtual events for Recovery Month. Last year, we had an in-person lunch at the Buckhead Club. We sold over, well, just under 300 tickets. We sold about 30 tickets more than we really had room for, to be honest. They got a little mad at us, but I was happy. And, you know, we can't do that again this year in person. So we're going to do some sort of virtual lunch that Gene is working on with Neil and others, myself and others. So we're going to have some things we do for Recovery Month, but it's going to be rocking. And the same with ARAD, it's going to be rocking. And I actually think that, you know, we're going to use, oh, how about this, Larry? How about this point before we adjourn? Let me tell y'all about two things that are so important, and they're not necessarily advocacy, but they're important. The Georgia Council on Substance Abuse, again, credit to Neil Campbell where it's due. We created, as a team, under her leadership, some virtual all recovery meetings back in March. And we have grown those now to where we had no earthly idea what we were doing, and would anybody show up the first night. They happen twice a day, every day, 7 days a week, twice a day in English. There's 2 a week in Spanish, and there's 1 a week dedicated to the LGBTQ community. There's been hundreds of these meetings, and thousands of people have participated. And so if you're looking for a meeting, we have those 3 offerings, and we put them on our social media. I just invite anybody who needs community to get on the virtual all recovery meeting. And then the other thing I just want to promote is the warm line, the CARES warm line. I should have a slide for that. It's 844-326-5400. I'm gonna say it again in a minute. But we've seen calls go up on the CARES warm line during COVID. It doesn't have to be for a crisis, y'all. It could be if you just want to talk to somebody, but maybe you don't need it personally, you know, but maybe you could promote it for us because people do need it. And if you're willing on your social media to promote the CARES warm line, we're trying to be available to people who can't afford a traditional treatment center during COVID and make sure they know there's somebody there for them. And it's 844-326-5400. And the team that does that does wonderful life-saving work. And just want to thank them for what they do and encourage you to share that number with anybody you're willing to share it with. So Larry, I wanted to get a plug in for those 2 things.
That's great. I put them in the chat box. I didn't get the time for the Spanish speaking meeting. Do you know, I know that the regular All Recovery meeting is at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. daily. I put the Zoom ID, but I don't know the time for the LGBTQ meeting or the Spanish. Okay.
Let me give you both. I'll work backwards. The LGBTQ meeting is Thursdays at noon, every Thursday at noon. And the Spanish language meetings are every Tuesday at 12 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So twice on Tuesdays. 12
at noon and what time?
8:30 p.m. at night.
And it's all of them are the same ID.
I think that's correct. Yes, they are. They all are 695-949-293.
There you go. It's all in the chat box, everybody. So please join us for our recovery meeting. We got you covered all day, every day, twice a day at least. And on some days, there are 4. We have our recovery meeting for you and your friends. I want to thank Jeff Breedlove for coming in and giving us this wonderful, awesome webinar on recovery advocacy. I had no idea there was a formula for advocacy, and it's way more than just going there and saying, I'm a person in recovery. And I appreciate you sharing all that you have with us. I also want to give a special thanks to George Brock for helping me out with the chat box and answering questions. Go ahead.
Laurie, you mentioned earlier that someone said, "Is this available? This slide?" Absolutely, positively. If you email me to that email that I still have and ask for the slideshow, of course I'll send it to you.
Great, thank you. I just want to tell everybody, thank y'all for coming. I appreciate each and every one of y'all, and CARES 22 is the best. See y'all next month. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye, Laurie. Thanks for having me.